The North Pole's icy winds howled outside the toy factory, rattling the frost-covered windows as if demanding entry. Inside, the air was warm and lively. The elves worked tirelessly, their cheerful voices blending with the rhythmic hum of conveyor belts and the occasional burst of jingling bells. Santa Claus sat at his oak desk, poring over the magical scroll that listed the names of children around the world, each carefully categorized under naughty or nice. Despite the festive chaos around him, Santa's focus wavered. He sighed deeply, his gloved hand pausing mid-check. Over the centuries, he had devoted himself to his mission, but for the first time, the weight of solitude pressed against his heart like the cold outside. He glanced at a snow globe on his desk, swirling with a scene of children laughing under a Christmas tree, and wondered if he had grown too distant from the very joy he brought to others. A sharp knock at the door interrupted his thoughts. The sound was unusual. Visitors were rare, and uninvited guests rarer still. Santa frowned slightly, setting his quill aside. "Who could that be?" he murmured, rising from his chair. The massive wooden door groaned as he opened it, revealing a woman bundled tightly in layers of woolen scarves and a heavy coat. Her figure was sturdy, her round cheeks rosy from the biting cold. But was her eyes that caught Santa's attention, bright, determined, and holding a flicker of desperation. "Santa Claus," she said, her voice firm despite the chill that made her breath visible. "I've come a long way to see you." Santa's bushy brows lifted in surprise. "Well, you've certainly succeeded," he said with a chuckle. "But who might you be? And what brings you here on such a frigid day?" "My name is Amanda," she said, stepping forward and pulling her scarf down to reveal her face more clearly. "And I need your help." "Help?" Santa repeated, ushering her inside. The warmth of a workshop enveloped her immediately, and she let out a sigh of relief. "Not many come knocking on my door, asking for help. It's usually the other way around." Amanda offered a small, nervous smile. "I know this isn't usual, but you're the only one I could think of who might say yes." Santa gestured toward a chair by the crackling fireplace, and Amanda sank into it, rubbing her gloved hands together. Santa took the seat across from her, leaning forward with curiosity. "Well, then," he said, his eyes twinkling, "what's this all about?" Amanda hesitated, her fingers fidgeting with the hem of her coat. Finally, she met his gaze. "My grandfather was a wealthy man," she began. "He left me his entire fortune, but only under one condition. I must be married by Christmas Eve, or the inheritance goes to someone else." Santa's laughter boomed, filling the room and causing a few elves to glance curiously in their direction. "Marry? My dear girl, I'm flattered, but surely you can find a more suitable candidate than a jolly old man like me." Amanda didn't laugh. Her expression remained steady, her voice unwavering. "It's not about romance, Santa. It's about what that money can do. If I inherit it, I plan to use it to help children, millions of them. Think of the schools we could build, the shelters we could fund. Think of the children who go to bed hungry, who've never known the joy of Christmas. Together, we could change their lives." Santa's smile faded slightly as her words settled over him. He leaned back, stroking his snowy beard. "And you believe marrying me is the only way to achieve this?" he asked, his tone more serious. "I've tried everything else," Amanda admitted, her voice softening. "But there isn't enough time left. People, they don't exactly line up to marry someone like me." Santa frowned, tilting his head. "Someone like you. You seem kind and determined. What's stopping them?" Amanda's gaze dropped, and for the first time, her confidence faltered. "I'm not what most people picture when they think of a perfect wife. Well, let's just say people see the outside before they see what's in here." She tapped her chest, a mix of bitterness and sadness in her voice. Santa's expression softened. He thought of the many children who wrote to him each year, some wishing not for toys, but for acceptance, for love, for someone to see them as they truly were. He saw that same longing in Amanda's eyes. "What would this marriage entail?" he asked cautiously. Amanda straightened, her voice regaining its edge of determination. A simple arrangement. We marry, I inherit the fortune, and I use it to fund projects that align with your mission. After Christmas, if you wish, we can part ways, and I'll make sure you're never tied to it again. But I promise, every penny will go to making the world a better place for children. Santa leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees as he studied her. And if I say no? Amanda took a deep breath, her hands gripping the armrests of the chair. Then I'll figure something else out. But I'm asking because I believe in you, Santa. You've spent centuries bringing joy to others. This is your chance to make that joy even bigger. I'm not asking for a miracle, just a partnership. The room fell silent, save for the soft crackle of the fire. Santa's eyes drifted to the snow globe on his desk, swirling with shimmering flakes. He thought of the children on his list, of the ones who needed more than a toy to brighten their lives. Finally, he smiled, leaning back with a twinkle in his eye. If this can truly bring joy to so many children, then perhaps it's worth a little unorthodoxy. Amanda, you have yourself a deal. Her face lit up with a mixture of relief and gratitude. Thank you, Santa. You won't regret this. Santa laughed, his hearty voice echoing through the workshop. Oh, I suspect I might, but something tells me this Christmas is going to be unforgettable. The days leading up to the wedding were unlike anything Amanda had ever experienced. She had envisioned a simple, practical event, a formal exchange to secure her inheritance and advance their shared mission. Instead, she found herself swept into a whirlwind of North Pole magic. The elves had taken it upon themselves to plan the ceremony, and their enthusiasm was boundless. Strings of golden lights were strung across the workshop. Enchanted snowflakes floated in midair, and tiny wreaths of holly adorned every corner. It was as if the North Pole itself was celebrating. Santa watched the preparations with amusement and a touch of apprehension. Mrs. Wiggins, he said, addressing his chief planner, do you think this is entirely necessary? Amanda and I agreed this would be. Understated. Mrs. Wiggins, her spectacles glinting under the light of the fireplace, barely looked up from her clipboard. Nonsense, Santa. Your wedding is an historic event, a cause for celebration. Besides, the elves have been working harder than ever this year. They deserve a little fun. Santa sighed, stroking his snowy beard. If you say so. Meanwhile, Amanda found herself caught in a storm of activity. She sat in a chair surrounded by bustling elves, each offering their opinions on every detail of her attire. Velvet, declared Pip, a seamstress elf with a tape measure draped around his neck. Green velvet will bring out the color of her eyes. No, silk. Red silk, countered another, waving a bolt of fabric in the air. She should match Santa's. Amanda laughed nervously, overwhelmed by the attention. I'm fine with anything, really. It doesn't need to be so elaborate. The elves ignore her protests, chattering excitedly as they worked. Amanda leaned back, letting the chaos swirl around her. A small part of her couldn't help but feel a spark of gratitude. These cheerful little beings, so full of life and energy, were the first to treat her as if she truly belonged. The day of the wedding dawned crisp and clear. The North Pole sparkled under a blanket of freshly fallen snow, and the aurora borealis painted streaks of green and gold across the sky. The ceremony was held in the heart of the workshop, transformed into a winter wonderland. Rows of benches crafted from candy cane striped wood lined the hall, and an archway of twinkling icicles marked the altar. Santa stood at the front, resplendent in his traditional red suit, his boots polished to perfection. For all his centuries of spreading joy, he couldn't recall feeling this nervous. He shifted his weight from one foot to the other, glancing around at the assembled elves, whose cheerful faces only heightened his anticipation. Relax, Santa, Mrs. Wiggins whispered, adjusting his hat. You're Santa Claus. You've faced blizzards and tantruming reindeer. This is nothing. Santa chuckled softly. You have a point, Wiggins. But still, it feels different. At the far end of the aisle, Amanda appeared, escorted by a line of elves tossing sparkling snow into the air. She wore a flowing green dress that shimmered like the northern lights, a fur-lined cape draped over her shoulders. A crown of holly rested on her head, and her eyes shone with a mixture of determination and vulnerability. The room fell silent as she walked toward him. For all her practicality, Amanda couldn't help but feel a lump rise in her throat. The magic of the moment, the warmth of the elves' smiles, and the sight of Santa himself waiting for her, it was overwhelming. When she reached the altar, Santa offered her a reassuring smile. "You look lovely, Amanda." She managed a small laugh. "And you look exactly like Santa Claus." The ceremony began, officiated by Mrs. Wiggins, who stood on a small podium to reach their height. "Today, we celebrate a union unlike any other," she announced, her voice quivering with emotion. "Two hearts, joining together to bring even more joy to the world." As the vows were exchanged, Amanda felt the weight of the moment settle over her. This wasn't just a formality. It was a promise, a partnership built on shared purpose and trust. "And do you, Santa Claus, promise to support Amanda in her mission to bring hope and joy to those in need?" Mrs. Wiggins asked. Santa's voice was steady as he replied, "I do." "And do you, Amanda, promise to honor Santa's legacy and work alongside him to spread the spirit of Christmas?" Amanda met his gaze, her voice strong despite the knot in her chest. "I do." With a wave of her wand, Mrs. Wiggins declared them married. The elves erupted in cheers, tossing glittering snow into the air. Bells chimed, reindeer stomped their hooves in celebration, and the enchanted snowflakes above the altar danced in spirals of light. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Amanda and Santa found themselves walking together under the starry sky. The North Pole stretched out around them, vast and quiet, the snow crunching softly beneath their boots. "Thank you for trusting me," Amanda said, breaking the silence. "I know this wasn't what you had in mind for, well, anything." Santa chuckled, his breath forming a cloud in the frigid air. "Life is full of surprises, Amanda, even for someone like me. But I must admit, I'm beginning to think this might be one of the better ones." Amanda smiled, but her expression turned thoughtful. "Sometimes I wonder if I'm really cut out for this. The weight of the inheritance, the expectations, it's a lot." Santa stopped and turned to face her, his kind eyes twinkling. "Amanda, you've already shown courage by coming here, by daring to dream of something bigger than yourself. That takes strength. And if you ever doubt yourself, just remember, you're not alone in this." Amanda felt a warmth spread through her, despite the cold. For the first time in years, she felt truly seen. As they continued walking, the aurora borealis shimmered above them, casting the snow in hues of green and gold. Theirs had begun as a practical arrangement, but beneath the surface, something deeper was taking root. The newlyweds didn't have much time to settle into their unusual arrangement. The terms of the inheritance required Amanda and Santa to spend time in the human world, presenting themselves as an ordinary married couple. This stipulation, though seemingly simple, would prove to be a challenge neither of them anticipated. The journey to the human world began with Santa's magical sleigh, which felt almost reluctant to leave the North Pole. Dasher grumbled under his breath, and Vixen needed extra encouragement to take off. Amanda sat beside Santa, clutching the sides of the sleigh as the reindeer charged through the shimmering veil separating their enchanted home from the bustling, less magical streets of New York City. When they landed atop a skyscraper, the contrast was stark. Gone were the peaceful snowdrifts and glowing auroras of the North Pole. Instead, they were greeted by a cacophony of honking horns, flashing neon signs, and the hurried footsteps of strangers bundled against the December cold. Santa straightened his coat and adjusted his hat. "Well," he said, his voice as steady as ever, "this is certainly different." Amanda, pulling her woolen scarf tighter, looked down at the busy streets below. Different doesn't even begin to cover it. Their new home was a modest apartment in Midtown Manhattan, a far cry from Santa's sprawling workshop. The space was decorated sparsely with a small, artificial Christmas tree and a mismatched assortment of furniture. "This will do nicely," Santa said, inspecting the room with his hands clasped behind his back. Amanda raised an eyebrow. "Nicely? I've seen closets bigger than this." Santa laughed heartily. "But it's not the size of a home that matters. It's the spirit within it." Despite his optimism, the challenges of their new life began to reveal themselves almost immediately. One of their first tasks was attending a holiday gala to meet key figures who could help Amanda navigate the legal and financial processes of her inheritance. It was a glittering event, filled with well-dressed elites sipping champagne and exchanging pleasantries under the soft glow of crystal chandeliers. Amanda, wearing a deep red dress and a nervous smile, felt out of place among the sea of polished appearances and cutting glances. Santa, in his human guise as a portly, bearded man in a tailored black suit, was less concerned. "Remember," he whispered as they entered the room, "we're here to spread goodwill. That starts with kindness, even if it's not returned." Amanda nodded, but couldn't help feeling the weight of the stairs. Whispers followed her as they moved through the crowd. "Is that the woman? Did you hear? She's supposed to be inheriting millions. Hard to believe, isn't it? She doesn't look the part." The words stung, but Amanda kept her head high. Santa, noticing her discomfort, leaned closer and said, "They can't see what matters most, Amanda. But I can." Despite Santa's reassuring words, the evening proved exhausting. People either ignored Amanda or spoke to her with a thin veneer of politeness, their eyes betraying judgment. By the time they returned to the apartment, Amanda was visibly shaken. "I knew people could be cruel," she said, sinking onto the couch. "But it's different when it's directed at you. I've dealt with this my whole life." But tonight, Santa sat beside her, his expression serious. "Amanda, the world can be harsh, but you have something they don't: resilience. And that's a rare gift." Amanda looked at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Sometimes it doesn't feel like enough." Santa placed a gentle hand on hers. "Trust me, you're stronger than you know." As the days passed, Amanda began to see the human world through Santa's eyes. They visited children's hospitals, homeless shelters, and schools, bringing small gifts and moments of joy to those in need. Santa seemed to transform in these moments, his presence radiating a warmth that melted away the coldness of the world. But it wasn't all magical. Amanda noticed how people treated her differently from Santa. While he was greeted with smiles and open arms, she was often met with indifference or even disdain. At one shelter, a well-meaning volunteer asked Santa, "How did you end up with her?" Amanda overheard and felt her heart sink. Later, as they walked back to their apartment, Amanda broke the silence. "You don't have to pretend it doesn't bother you, Santa. People look at me and wonder why you agreed to this." Santa stopped in his tracks and turned to her, his blue eyes bright with conviction. "Amanda, I don't care what they think. I see you for who you are, someone kind, courageous, and determined. And that's worth more than all their shallow opinions combined." Amanda smiled faintly, but the doubts lingered. One evening, as they prepared for another event, Amanda caught sight of herself in the mirror. She adjusted her dress, trying to smooth its fit over her curves. Santa walked in, carrying a pair of his polished boots, and noticed her expression. "What's on your mind?" he asked, setting the boots aside. Amanda hesitated before replying. "Do you ever wish you'd said no? That you'd stayed in the North Pole instead of this?" Santa stepped closer, his voice gentle but firm. "Amanda, every day I see the strength it takes for you to face this world. And every day, I'm reminded why I agreed to this. You have a fire in you that inspires me. So no, I don't regret a thing." Tears welled in Amanda's eyes, but she blinked them away. "You always know what to say, don't you?" Santa chuckled. "It's part of the job." As they left for the evening, Amanda felt a small but growing sense of hope. Perhaps, with Santa by her side, she could face whatever challenges the human world threw her way. The air in the orphanage was thick with the mingling scents of cinnamon and pine, the faint buzz of excitement trembling through the halls. Amanda and Santa arrived just as the children gathered in the main room, a sprawling space decorated with paper snowflakes and a small, slightly lopsided Christmas tree. The director, a wiry woman named Mrs. Hampton, greeted them with a nervous smile. "We're so grateful you could visit. The children don't get much excitement around here. It's hard enough keeping the lights on." Santa's eyes softened as he took in the modest decorations and the worn furniture. "Every child deserves a little magic," he said warmly. Amanda, holding a sack of gifts, nodded. "Let's make this a day they'll remember." The children were tentative at first, clustering in small groups as Amanda and Santa entered the room. Amanda knelt beside a little boy with bright eyes and a patched sweater. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Lucas," he mumbled, eyeing the bag she carried. "Well, Lucas," Amanda said, pulling out a toy truck painted in vibrant red. "I think this might belong to you." His face lit up, and he clutched the truck to his chest. "For me? Really?" "Really," Amanda said with a smile, her heart swelling at his joy. As Santa mingled with the other children, Amanda found herself surrounded. She handed out dolls, puzzles, and stuffed animals, each gift met with gasps and laughter. But wasn't just the toys that captivated the children. It was Amanda herself. "You're so pretty," a little girl with pigtails said, tugging at Amanda's sleeve. Amanda blinked, taken aback. "Me? Oh, thank you, sweetheart. You look like a queen," the girl continued, her voice full of awe. "Like a Christmas queen." Amanda felt a lump rise in her throat. She had spent so much of her life feeling invisible, dismissed or judged. But here, in this room full of wide-eyed children, she saw herself through their eyes, kind, caring, and worthy of admiration. Santa watched from across the room, his heart swelling with pride. Amanda wasn't just handing out toys. She was giving these children something far more valuable, a sense of love and belonging. As the visit wound down, a young girl named Emily approached Amanda. She was small for her age, with big, serious eyes and a well-worn dress. "Are you really Mrs. Claus?" Emily asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Amanda knelt down, her gaze meeting Emily's. "I suppose I am." Emily studied her intently before nodding. "You're the prettiest Mrs. Claus ever." The words struck Amanda like a lightning bolt. Tears welled in her eyes as she pulled Emily into a gentle hug. "Thank you, sweetheart. That means the world to me." Nearby, Santa felt his own eyes grow misty. He had always understood the power of kindness, but seeing Amanda embraced by the children reaffirmed something he'd long believed, that true beauty and worth came from the heart. That night, back at the apartment, Amanda sat by the window, staring out at the city lights. "They were amazing," she said softly. "They were," Santa agreed, sipping a mug of cocoa. "But so were you." Amanda turned to him, her expression uncertain. "You think so?" Santa set his mug down and leaned forward. "Amanda, what I saw today was magic. Not the kind of magic I used to fly reindeer or make toys. It was the kind of magic that changes hearts." Amanda's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "It's funny. I thought I came here to give, but I feel like they gave me more than I ever expected." Santa smiled. That's the true spirit of Christmas. Giving and receiving are two sides of the same coin. When you give with love, you get love in return. Amanda nodded, her heart feeling lighter than it had in years. For the first time, she began to see herself not as an outsider or a placeholder, but as someone who belonged in the story of Christmas. The snow outside fell steadily, muffling the usual hustle and bustle of the city. Inside their small apartment, Amanda was surrounded by piles of papers, her fingers smudged with ink from hours of combing through her grandfather's documents. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, its glow dancing against the walls as Santa placed a fresh mug of cocoa beside her. "You've been at this for hours," he said gently. "Take a break. Even the most determined people need rest." Amanda barely glanced up. "I'm almost done. I just want to make sure I haven't missed anything. The inheritance papers need to be airtight before we finalize the process." Santa chuckled easing into the chair across from her. "You're more meticulous than some of my elves." Amanda offered a tired smile before returning her attention to the stack of documents. Near the bottom of the box, her hand brushed against something unusual, a small leather-bound book, its edges worn from time. She lifted it carefully, the initials JW catching her eye in faded gold lettering. "What's this?" she murmured, running her fingers over the cracked cover. Santa leaned forward. "It looks like a journal. Was your grandfather a writer?" Amanda shrugged. Curiosity piqued as she opened the book. The first pages were filled with tidy handwriting, documenting mundane details about properties and investments. But as she flipped through, her heart skipped a beat. An entry dated 5 years earlier stood out, the ink slightly smudged, as if written in haste. Amanda's inheritance clause, a test of character. No marriage requirement truly exists. If she seeks to fulfill the condition, it will reveal her determination to succeed despite the odds. "I've always known she has the strength within her. I just hope she realizes it too." Amanda froze, staring at the page as the words blurred in front of her. She read it again, her breath quickening with each pass. "There's no marriage requirement," she whispered, the journal slipping slightly from her hands. Santa, sensing her shift in energy, furrowed his brow. "What did you say?" Amanda turned to him, her voice trembling. "It's not real. The condition. It was never real. My grandfather." She held up the journal, the pages quivering. "He made it up. He wanted to test me." Santa reached for the journal, his face calm but serious. He read the passage aloud, his rich voice steady as ever. When he finished, he looked at Amanda, his expression unreadable. "Did you know about this?" "No," Amanda exclaimed, her voice rising. "I swear I didn't. I thought this was my only option." Santa set the journal down, his hands resting on the table. "Why would your grandfather create such a condition? Did he doubt you?" Amanda shook her head, her throat tight. "No, he believed in me. He always told me I was capable of great things, but I never believed him. I thought," she swallowed hard, "I thought the only way people would take me seriously was if I proved myself in some grand, dramatic way. And I didn't think anyone would help me if there wasn't something in it for them." Her voice cracked on the last words, and she looked away, ashamed. Santa leaned back, his expression softening. "Amanda," he said gently, "don't you see? You didn't need this clause. You didn't need to prove yourself to me or anyone else. Everything you've accomplished, everything you've done for those children, for the people around you, that was all you." Amanda wiped her eyes, shaking her head. "But I lied to you. I dragged you into this under false pretenses. How can you just forgive that?" Santa's gaze held hers, steady and warm. "Because I see the person you are, Amanda. I see your heart. And I know your intentions were never selfish. You wanted to do good, even when you doubted yourself. That's what matters." The conversation lingered in Amanda's mind long after Santa left the room. She sat by the fire, the journal open in her lap, her thoughts a whirlwind of guilt, relief, and uncertainty. Later that evening, Santa returned with 2 mugs of cocoa, handing one to Amanda as he settled into the armchair beside her. "You've been quiet," he observed. Amanda stared into the flames. "I keep thinking, what if my grandfather was wrong? What if I'm not as strong as he believed I was?" Santa chuckled softly, a sound like distant sleigh bells. "Your grandfather wasn't wrong, and I'll tell you why. You didn't give up, even when the odds were against you. You came here, you faced the judgment of strangers, and you fought to make a difference. That takes strength." Amanda turned to him, her eyes glistening. "You always know what to say, don't you?" Santa smiled. "It's part of the job." They sat in companionable silence for a while, the fire crackling softly between them. Finally, Amanda spoke. "What happens now? Do we end this arrangement?" Santa took a thoughtful sip of his cocoa. "That depends on you. The inheritance was never the real reason I agreed to this, Amanda. I believed in your mission, and in you. That hasn't changed." Amanda felt a warmth spread through her chest, a sense of acceptance she hadn't realized she'd been craving. "Thank you," she said softly. "For what?" "For seeing me, for believing in me, even when I didn't believe in myself." Santa's eyes twinkled as he raised his mug in a small toast. "To new beginnings." Amanda smiled, lifting her mug to clink against his. To new beginnings. The revelation could have unraveled everything, but instead, it forged a deeper connection between them. Amanda realized that her strength wasn't in the conditions of the will or the opinions of others. It was in the choices she made and the heart she brought to every decision. The North Pole had never looked more radiant. Snow sparkled under the ethereal glow of the aurora borealis, casting an otherworldly light on the toy workshop, now busier than ever. Inside, the elves were hard at work, their laughter and chatter filling the air as Amanda stood alongside Santa, overseeing the final preparations for Christmas Eve. It had been weeks since the revelation of her grandfather's journal, and though the initial shock had worn off, Amanda still carried its lessons close to her heart. Her confidence had grown in quiet, subtle ways. She spoke with more assurance, her ideas sharper, her passion brighter. "I've finished reviewing the delivery routes," Amanda said, handing a scroll to Santa. "We've added stops for orphanages, shelters, and schools in areas we haven't reached before." Santa scanned the list, nodding with approval. "Excellent work. I'm impressed by how thorough you've been." Amanda smiled, a touch of pride warming her cheeks. "It felt good to focus on something bigger than myself." As they spoke, the head elf, Mrs. Wiggins, bustled into the room, her tiny spectacles perched precariously on her nose. Amanda, there's a situation." Santa frowned, setting the scroll aside. "What sort of situation?" Mrs. Wiggins adjusted her spectacles nervously. "The magic reserves. Something's wrong. They've been flickering all morning, and we can't seem to stabilize them." Santa's expression darkened. "Take me to the generator." The magic generator was the heart of the North Pole, a crystalline structure pulsating with shimmering light. It powered the sleigh, the toy-making machines, and the enchantments that made Christmas possible. When Amanda and Santa arrived, they found a cluster of anxious elves gathered around the crystal, which was dimmer than usual, its glow fading in and out like a weakening heartbeat. "Has this happened before?" Amanda asked, her voice tinged with worry. "Not like this," Santa admitted, inspecting the crystal. "The magic is tied to the spirit of Christmas, the belief and joy of children around the world. If it's failing, it means that belief is fading." Amanda's stomach dropped. "What can we do to fix it?" Santa looked at her, his expression grave. "We need to restore the spirit of Christmas, and we need to do it tonight." Amanda sprang into action alongside Santa, brainstorming ways to reignite the fading magic. They gathered the elves, who offered suggestions ranging from spreading goodwill to enchanting the northern lights to shine brighter. But nothing seemed enough. "It's not just about light shows or toys," Amanda said, pacing the workshop. "We need something deeper, something that reminds people what Christmas really means." Santa's eyes lit up with understanding. "You're right. It's about love, generosity, and connection." He turned to the elves. "Prepare the sleigh. We'll visit the places that need us most, together." Amanda's heart skipped. "You mean, I'm coming with you?" Santa grinned. "I can't do this alone, Amanda. You've shown me that Christmas is about more than one person. It's about all of us." The sleigh took off into the night, Amanda sitting beside Santa as the reindeer soared through the starry sky. Their first stop was a small village in the mountains, where the town square was eerily quiet, the holiday lights dim. Amanda and Santa worked quickly, delivering food, gifts, and even decorating the village tree. When the children awoke the next morning, they were met with a dazzling display of lights, presents, and a renewed sense of wonder. "This is incredible," Amanda whispered as they flew to their next destination. Santa smiled. "This is what Christmas is about, sharing joy and hope with those who need it most." Their journey continued through the night, each stop reigniting a spark of magic. Amanda found herself laughing with children, embracing grateful parents, and even comforting those who had lost faith in the season. At every turn, she saw how the small gestures they made rippled outward, creating a wave of belief and love. As they neared the end of their journey, the sleigh's crystal compass began to glow brighter. "The magic is returning," Santa said, his voice filled with relief. Amanda looked out over the horizon, the faint glow of dawn beginning to break. "We did it, didn't we?" Santa nodded. "We did it together." When they returned to the North Pole, the magic generator was glowing brighter than ever, its crystalline light bathing the workshop in a warm, golden hue. The elves erupted into cheers as Amanda and Santa stepped off the sleigh, their faces flushed with the cold and the triumph of their journey. "You saved Christmas," Mrs. Wiggins exclaimed, tears glistening in her eyes. Amanda glanced at Santa, her heart full. "We all did." Later that morning, as the North Pole settled back into its usual rhythm, Amanda stood by the window, watching the snow fall gently outside. Santa joined her, a quiet smile on his face. "You've changed, Amanda," he said softly. She turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "Maybe. Or maybe I just finally saw who I've always been." Santa placed a hand on her shoulder, his gaze warm and steady. "Either way, you've reminded me of something I'd almost forgotten. Christmas isn't just about toys or traditions. It's about the hearts we touch and the love we share." Amanda smiled, a sense of peace settling over her. For the first time in years, she felt truly at home, not just in the North Pole, but within herself. The North Pole was alive with a glow Amanda had never seen before. The crystalline structures seemed to pulse with light, the snow glittering under the ever-changing hues of the aurora borealis. The air hummed with magic, but it wasn't just the enchanted atmosphere. Something deeper had shifted. The elves moved with a joyful energy, their laughter mingling with the soft jingles of sleigh bells as they completed the final preparations for Christmas Eve. Amanda stood at the heart of the workshop, watching the bustling scene with a sense of awe. The towering shelves were lined with brightly wrapped presents, each tagged with a child's name and a flourish of golden script. The magic of Christmas felt more vibrant than ever, and she knew it wasn't just the result of hard work. It was the renewal of belief in the world and within herself. Santa approached, his boots clicking softly on the wooden floor. "You've done extraordinary work this year, Amanda," he said, his voice warm and steady. Amanda glanced up from the stack of delivery lists she was reviewing. "We all did. This place, it's more than I ever imagined." Santa chuckled, his eyes twinkling. "The North Pole has always been special, but with you here, it feels fuller, more alive." Amanda's cheeks flushed. She wasn't used to such direct praise, but she felt a quiet pride stirring in her chest. As the evening unfolded, the workshop buzzed with anticipation. Elves carried sacks of gifts to the sleigh, their nimble hands moving in perfect coordination. The sleigh itself was a masterpiece, polished wood inlaid with golden filigree, its runners shimmering with an iridescent glow. The reindeer, their harnesses adorned with tiny bells, stomped eagerly, their breaths puffing out in frosty clouds. Amanda watched from the sidelines, her hands clasped nervously. It was her first Christmas Eve at the North Pole, and though she had poured herself into the work, the moment still felt surreal. Ready for takeoff, Santa called Tippy, a young elf who had been polishing the sleigh's brass trim. Santa gave a hearty laugh. "Not quite yet, Tippy. There's one last thing to do." He turned to Amanda, his expression softening. "Come with me." Curious, she followed him to a quieter corner of the workshop, where the head elf, Mrs. Wiggins, waited with an air of excitement. A small podium stood between them, draped with holly and tinsel, and atop it rested a velvet box the color of Christmas red. "What's going on?" Amanda asked, her brow furrowing. Mrs. Wiggins adjusted her tiny spectacles, her voice quivering with emotion. "Amanda, we've watched you transform since the day you arrived here. You've given your heart and soul to Christmas, and in doing so, you've given us something we didn't know we needed, a reminder of why we do what we do." Amanda blinked, overwhelmed. I don't know what to say." Mrs. Wiggins opened the box with a flourish, revealing a delicate golden pin shaped like a snowflake. Inscribed in elegant script were the words Mommy Noel. The elves cheered, their tiny voices filling the workshop with jubilant cries of Mommy Noel and hooray for Amanda. Tears pricked Amanda's eyes as she stepped forward, her hands trembling as she reached for the pin. "I don't deserve this," she murmured, her voice catching. Santa stepped closer, his expression unwavering. "Oh, but you do. You've brought something to Christmas that can't be measured in toys or magic. You've brought heart, Amanda, and for that, you deserve every bit of this honor." Amanda took the pin, her emotions threatening to spill over. "Thank you," she said softly, looking out at the sea of smiling elves. "Thank you all. I never thought I'd find a place where I truly belonged." As the celebration settled into a quiet hum, Amanda helped Santa prepare for his journey. She adjusted Dasher's harness, her hands steady but her thoughts racing. "So," she said, glancing up at Santa, "this is it, the big night." Santa smiled, his gloved hands tightening the reins. "It is. But it's not just my big night anymore." Amanda tilted her head. "What do you mean?" He gestured to the empty seat beside him in the sleigh. "Care to join me this year? The magic of Christmas is too big for one person to carry alone. I'd like to share it with you." Amanda's heart skipped a beat. "You want me to come with you? But this is your tradition, your journey." Santa chuckled. "Traditions grow, Amanda, and this one feels like it's meant to be ours now." Her hesitation melted under the warmth of his smile. "I'd be honored," she said, climbing into the sleigh beside him. The takeoff was exhilarating. The reindeer surged forward, their hooves barely touching the snow before they soared into the night sky. The sleigh cut through the clouds like a shooting star, the world stretching out beneath them in a patchwork of twinkling lights. Their first stop was a small village tucked in the mountains, where the townspeople had almost forgotten the magic of Christmas. Amanda helped Santa unload the gifts, her heart swelling as she saw the joy on the children's faces. At every stop, she felt the same wonder, the simple yet profound power of bringing happiness to others. By the time dawn approached, Amanda felt as though she had been part of something truly extraordinary. The sleigh touched down at the North Pole, the reindeer stamping their hooves in triumph. The elves greeted them with cheers, and Amanda found herself swept into the celebration. She had always thought of Christmas as a fleeting season, but now she understood. It was a way of living, a belief in the power of love and connection. As the morning light filled the workshop, Amanda stood beside Santa, watching the elves dance and sing. "This," she said softly, "is what Christmas is really about, isn't it?" Santa nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's about bringing out the best in ourselves and each other. And you, Amanda, you've done that more than you realize." Amanda smiled, a quiet sense of peace settling over her. For the first time, she felt like she was exactly where she was meant to be. The North Pole hummed with the quiet satisfaction that followed a successful Christmas. The workshop, though quieter now, still carried the warmth of celebration. The elves, exhausted but content, took a well-deserved break, filling the halls with soft chatter and the occasional burst of laughter. Amanda stood by the window of the main office, her breath fogging the glass as she gazed out at the snowy expanse. It was a new day, and with it came a new sense of purpose. Behind her, Santa entered the room, his boots clicking softly against the wooden floor. "You're up early," he said, his voice a gentle rumble. Amanda turned, offering a small smile. "Couldn't sleep. I've been thinking about everything we did last night. The places we visited, the people we met. It's still sinking in." Santa chuckled, settling into his chair by the fireplace. "Christmas has a way of doing that. It's not just one night of magic. It's the ripples it leaves behind." Amanda joined him, her hands wrapped around a steaming mug of cocoa. "I feel like we've started something bigger than just one Christmas. There's so much more we can do, Santa. Not just gifts, but real change. Helping communities, reaching children in ways that last beyond the holidays." Santa leaned forward, his blue eyes twinkling. "And how do you propose we do that?" Amanda's face lit up as she set her mug aside, pulling out a notebook filled with scribbled ideas. We can expand the toy workshop to include educational tools, books, art supplies, things that inspire creativity. We can create partnerships with human organizations to make sure no child is left behind, no matter where they are. Santa listened intently, nodding as she spoke. These are ambitious ideas, Amanda, but I've never been one to shy away from ambition. She smiled, a flicker of uncertainty crossing her face. Do you think the elves will go along with it? They've been doing things a certain way for centuries. Santa laughed, his belly shaking. Amanda, if there's one thing I've learned about the elves, it's that they thrive on change, especially when it brings joy. They'll follow you because they see what I see. Your heart is in the right place. Amanda's new role as Mommy Noel began to take shape over the following weeks. The elves, initially unsure about her ideas, quickly warmed to her enthusiasm and creativity. One morning, she found herself in the workshop's break room, where a group of elves was gathered around a small table covered in sketches and blueprints. Mrs. Claus, Pip, the head toy designer, exclaimed, waving her over. Come look at this. We've started working on those inclusive toys you mentioned. Amanda leaned over the table, her eyes scanning the colorful designs. There were dolls with different skin tones, action figures in wheelchairs, and puzzles featuring words in multiple languages. This is incredible, she said, her voice filled with genuine admiration. You've outdone yourselves. The elves beamed with pride, their earlier skepticism completely replaced by excitement. The changes Amanda introduced weren't limited to the toys. She also focused on improving life at the North Pole itself. The elves, who had always worked tirelessly without complaint, were given new opportunities to relax and celebrate their efforts. Every Friday night, Amanda announced during one of their meetings, we'll have a feast in the Grey Hall. Good food, music, and games. Just a way to say thank you for everything you do. The elves erupted into cheers, their tiny voices filling the room. And Amanda continued, I've set up a new space in the West Wing, a lounge where you can take breaks, read, or just unwind. Santa watched from the sidelines, his heart swelling with pride. Amanda's presence had brought a balance to the North Pole that even he hadn't realized was missing. One evening, as the snow fell softly outside, Amanda and Santa sat together in the workshop's quiet office. The fire crackled warmly, casting flickering shadows on the walls. You've transformed this place, Santa said, breaking the comfortable silence. Amanda shook her head modestly. I didn't do it alone. The elves, you. We're a team. Santa smiled. Still, you've brought something unique to Christmas, Amanda. Something I couldn't have done on my own. Amanda glanced at him, her expression thoughtful. Do you ever regret agreeing to this? To us. Santa's laugh was deep and genuine. Amanda, if I've learned anything in my centuries of delivering Christmas cheer, it's that the best surprises are the ones you never see coming. You've been one of those surprises. Her cheeks flushed as she looked away, a soft smile playing on her lips. That night, as Amanda prepared for bed, she paused by the window, looking out at the endless expanse of snow and stars. For the first time in years, she felt a profound sense of belonging, not just to the North Pole, but to herself. Christmas had always been a season of giving, but now she understood it as something more, a season of connection, growth, and love. And with Santa by her side, she knew the journey was only just beginning. The North Pole was still settling into its peaceful rhythm after the whirlwind of Christmas, when an unnatural chill began creeping through the air. At first, it seemed like an ordinary cold snap. After all, the Arctic was no stranger to biting winds and frosted mornings. But soon, the elves noticed something strange. The snow, which usually sparkled with warmth under the aurora borealis, had turned a pale, lifeless gray. In the great workshop, Amanda and Santa were finalizing plans for the new year when Mrs. Wiggins burst into the room, her tiny frame trembling. Santa. Amanda, she gasped, clutching her clipboard as if it were a lifeline. Something's wrong. The magic. It's fading again. Santa stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the floor. What do you mean, Wiggins? The generator has been stable since Christmas Eve. It's not the generator, Mrs. Wiggins replied, her voice wavering. It's her. Amanda frowned. Her? Who are you talking about? The Queen of Ice, Mrs. Wiggins whispered, as if speaking her name might summon her. The Queen of Ice was a name rarely spoken at the North Pole. Long ago, she had been a rival to Santa, bitter over his role as the symbol of joy and generosity. Her icy heart, envious of the love children gave to Santa, had driven her to isolate herself in her frozen palace far to the north. Over the years, she had faded into legend, until now. Amanda listened intently as Mrs. Wiggins explained the growing signs of the Queen's return. Snowstorms darker than night, whispers on the wind, and now, the dulling magic that kept the North Pole alive. We've detected her magic seeping into the perimeter, Mrs. Wiggins said. If she continues, she could freeze the entire North Pole, and Christmas along with it. Santa's jaw tightened, his usually warm eyes glinting with resolve. I won't let that happen. Amanda stepped forward, her voice steady. Neither will I. What do we do? Santa hesitated, his gaze falling on Amanda. This isn't your fight. The Queen of Ice is dangerous. Her magic is cold and cruel. I can't ask you to face her. Amanda squared her shoulders. You're not asking. I'm volunteering. This isn't just your home, Santa. It's mine too. And if we don't stand up to her, who will? Santa studied her for a moment, his expression a mixture of pride and concern. Finally, he nodded. Then we'll face her together. The journey to the Queen's palace was grueling. The sleigh struggled against relentless winds, the reindeer's breaths frosting the air as they pushed forward. Amanda wrapped herself tightly in a fur-lined coat, her hands clutching the edge of the sleigh as snow whipped around them. Are you sure about this? Santa asked, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. Amanda turned to him, her eyes filled with determination. I've never been more sure of anything. As they approached the palace, its jagged spires of ice loomed in the distance, glowing faintly with an eerie blue light. The sleigh landed on the frozen ground, the reindeer stomping uneasily. Santa helped Amanda out of a sleigh, and together they approached the towering gates. They opened with a deafening creak, revealing a vast hall carved entirely of ice. The air was so cold it burned, each breath hanging in the air like fragile clouds. At the far end of the hall, seated on a throne of glimmering frost, was the Queen of Ice. Her figure was tall and regal, her gown shimmering like icicles under the moonlight. Her eyes, cold and piercing, locked onto Santa and Amanda as they entered. So, she said, her voice like the crack of a glacier, the great Santa Claus finally comes to visit. And he brings a companion. How quaint. Santa stepped forward, his voice firm. This ends now. Ice Queen, you won't harm the North Pole or the magic of Christmas. The Queen laughed, the sound echoing through the hall. Harm. Oh. Santa, you misunderstand. I'm simply taking what I've been denied. The love, the adoration. All of it should have been mine. Instead, the world chose you. Her gaze shifted to Amanda, a cruel smile curving her lips. And now you think you can share that power with her? A human. Amanda felt a surge of anger, but held her ground. Christmas isn't about power. It's about love, hope, and generosity. Things you'll never understand if you keep shutting the world out. The Queen's eyes narrowed. Bold words for someone so insignificant. Santa placed a protective hand on Amanda's shoulder. Amanda is more significant than you'll ever realize. She embodies the spirit of Christmas in ways you couldn't hope to. The Queen rose from her throne, the air growing colder with each step she took toward them. If you won't surrender, then I'll take the magic by force. The battle that followed was fierce. The Queen unleashed a storm of icy shards, the winds howling as they swirled around the hall. Santa countered with his own magic, a golden glow emanating from his hands as he protected Amanda and himself. But it was Amanda who turned the tide. Remembering the orphanage, the children who had seen beauty and kindness in her, she called upon the courage she had found within herself. "You don't have to do this," Amanda shouted, stepping into the storm. "You think no one sees you, but that's not true. I see you. I see someone who's hurting, who's desperate to be loved." The queen hesitated, her icy magic faltering for a moment. Amanda pressed on. "You've spent so long pushing people away, but it doesn't have to be like this. You can choose a different path." For a fleeting second, the queen's expression softened, but then her face hardened again. "Your words mean nothing," she snapped. Amanda turned to Santa. "She's feeding off the fear and anger. We need to show her the opposite." Santa nodded, reaching out to Amanda. Together, they channeled their combined magic, filling the hall with a brilliant, golden light. It radiated warmth, love, and hope, washing over the queen like a sunrise breaking through a storm. The ice around them began to melt, the storm subsiding. The queen stumbled back, her icy exterior cracking as tears welled in her eyes. "What is this?" she whispered. "Forgiveness," Amanda said gently. By the time they returned to the North Pole, the Queen of Ice had retreated to her palace, vowing to leave Christmas untouched. Amanda and Santa were greeted as heroes, the elves cheering their bravery. As the glow of the magic generator returned to full strength, Amanda realized that Christmas wasn't just about gifts or traditions. It was about the courage to bring light to the darkest places. The North Pole was alive with celebration. Word of Amanda and Santa's victory over the Queen of Ice spread quickly through the workshop, igniting a wave of joy and relief among the elves. The magic generator pulsed brightly, its golden light bathing the room in warmth, as if mirroring the restored hope in everyone's hearts. Inside the Great Hall, preparations were underway for a feast unlike any other. Long tables were adorned with shimmering white tablecloths, their surfaces overflowing with steaming platters of roasted vegetables, freshly baked bread, and sweets of every kind. Strings of enchanted lights crisscrossed the high ceilings, casting a soft glow that made the space feel both grand and cozy. Amanda stood at the entrance, watching the elves scurry about with last-minute touches. She couldn't help but smile as she saw Pip attempting to balance a towering cake shaped like a Christmas tree, the frosting glistening like fresh snow. "You've outdone yourselves," she said, addressing the bustling crowd. Tippy, holding a tray of sparkling cider, grinned. "It's not every day we celebrate heroes, Mrs. Claus." Amanda's cheeks flushed at the title, but her heart swelled with pride. As the evening began, the hall filled with laughter and music. Elves clinked their glasses together, toasting to the restored magic and the bravery of their leaders. Amanda sat beside Santa at the head of the table, her plate piled high with festive treats. "Does it always feel this alive?" she asked, taking in the scene. Santa chuckled, his blue eyes twinkling. "Christmas has always brought people together, but tonight is something special. They're not just celebrating the holiday, they're celebrating you." Amanda shook her head modestly. "It wasn't just me. None of this would have been possible without you and everyone here." Santa leaned closer, his voice warm. "Maybe, but you've shown them, and me, that Christmas is about more than tradition. It's about growth, courage, and finding the light in unexpected places. That's worth celebrating." Partway through the feast, Mrs. Wiggins stood on her chair, her tiny frame somehow commanding the attention of the entire room. "A toast," she declared, raising her glass. "To Amanda, the bravest and kindest Mommy Noel we could have asked for." The room erupted into cheers, the elves pounding their small fists on the tables in celebration. Amanda laughed, lifting her own glass as tears pricked her eyes. "Thank you," she said, her voice carrying across the hall. "This place, this season, it's given me more than I ever thought possible. I've learned that Christmas isn't just about what we give to others, but what we allow ourselves to receive. Love, belonging, hope. You've all given me those things, and I'll never stop being grateful." The applause that followed was deafening, echoing through the great hall like 1,000 tiny bells. As the night wore on, the festivities moved to the center of the hall, where a large dance floor had been cleared. Elves twirled to the music of a lively fiddle, their tiny feet tapping in perfect rhythm. Santa, despite his protests that he was too old for dancing, was soon pulled into the fray by a group of determined elves. Amanda watched from the sidelines, laughing at the sight of Santa spinning Mrs. Wiggins around with surprising agility. "You're not getting out of it that easily," Pip said, appearing at her side with an impish grin. Before Amanda could respond, she was gently nudged toward the floor, where Santa extended a hand to her. "Care to join me?" She hesitated for only a moment before taking his hand. Why not? The music shifted to a slower tune, and Amanda found herself swaying in Santa's arms, the warmth of the moment wrapping around her like soft blanket. "You know," she said softly, "if you told me a year ago that I'd be here, dancing with Santa Claus in the North Pole, I would have thought you were crazy." Santa chuckled. "And if you'd told me I'd be sharing Christmas with someone as remarkable as you, I might have thought the same." Amanda looked up at him, her eyes shining. "Thank you for believing in me." Santa's voice was gentle. "It's easy to believe in someone who reminds me of everything Christmas stands for." As the evening wound down, Amanda stepped outside for a moment of quiet reflection. The snow fell softly, the aurora borealis casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the sky. Santa joined her, his presence warm against the icy air. "Penny for your thoughts?" he asked. Amanda smiled. "I was just thinking about how much has changed. A few months ago, I didn't know where I belonged. And now, I feel like I found my place." Santa nodded, his gaze fixed on the horizon. "Christmas has a way of doing that, showing us who we are and where we're meant to be." Amanda turned to him, her expression thoughtful. "So what's next? For us? For the North Poles?" Santa grinned. "Whatever we decide to make it, together." As they stood under the shimmering lights of the aurora, Amanda realized that Christmas wasn't just a season, it was a way of life. And for the first time, she felt ready to embrace it fully, knowing she was exactly where she was meant to be. The weeks after Christmas brought a renewed sense of purpose to the North Pole, where once the workshop hummed with the steady rhythm of tradition, now it buzzed with innovation and creativity. Amanda had sparked something extraordinary, a new way of thinking about Christmas. In the grand workshop, long tables were crowded with prototypes, blueprints, and piles of materials. Amanda stood at the center, surrounded by elves holding up their latest creations. "This," Pip announced proudly, holding up a doll with a vibrant smile and a pair of prosthetic legs, "is one of our most detailed designs yet. Look at these movable joints. And we've included an extra outfit so the kids can customize it." Next to him, Tippy grinned as he displayed a set of building blocks engraved with Braille letters. "We made sure these are accessible for everyone," he explained. Amanda turned the blocks over in her hands, a wave of emotion welling up. "This is amazing," she said, her voice steady but full of warmth. "You've captured exactly what we're trying to do. Make every child feel seen and celebrated." Santa approached from across the hall, his presence as steady and comforting as ever. "It seems the elves have caught your vision, Amanda," he said, surveying the table with a smile. Amanda nodded, her eyes shining. "They've gone above and beyond. These toys are more than gifts, they're messages. They tell kids they belong." Santa picked up a puzzle that featured children of diverse backgrounds working together under the words, "The world is brighter together." "Amanda," he said, his voice soft, "you've turned Christmas into something even more magical. You've reminded us all that the spirit of the season is about connection." But Amanda's vision wasn't confined to the workshop. In the communication room, where enchanted crystals allowed them to connect with organizations across the world, Amanda worked tirelessly to establish partnerships. One snowy afternoon, she sat with a glowing crystal in front of her, speaking to a representative of a global education nonprofit. "We're expanding our toy line to include materials that inspire creativity and learning," Amanda explained. "Art supplies, books, science kits. We want children to know they can dream big, no matter where they come from." The woman on the other side of the connection smiled warmly. "Mrs. Claus, this is incredible. These tools can change lives. We're honored to help distribute them. After the call ended, Amanda leaned back in her chair, exhaling deeply. The work was exhausting, but it filled her with a sense of purpose she had never known. As Christmas approached, the impact of Amanda's ideas began to take shape. In the workshop, the elves packed crates of toys designed for inclusivity, dolls with various skin tones, action figures using sign language, puzzles that celebrated different cultures. Alongside the toys were books filled with stories from around the world and art kits designed for children of all abilities. The elves worked with a fervor Amanda had never seen before. "Every toy feels like a little piece of magic," Pip said as he packed a box with care. "It's because they are," Amanda replied, her voice filled with pride. Santa, overseeing the preparations, nodded in agreement. "This is more than we've ever done before, and it's all thanks to you, Amanda." On Christmas Eve, as the final sacks were loaded onto the sleigh, Mrs. Wiggins approached Amanda and Santa with a small bundle of letters tied with a red ribbon. "These arrived this morning," she said, her voice thick with emotion. Amanda untied the ribbon and began to read the first letter aloud. "Dear Santa and Mrs. Claus, thank you for the puzzle you sent me. It had people from all over the world, just like my friends at school. I'm going to hang it on my wall when I finish it. Love, Ellie." She paused, her throat tightening, before moving to the next letter. "Dear North Pole, thank you for the book and crayons. I drew a picture of my family, and it's the best Christmas gift I've ever had. From Luis." Tears filled Amanda's eyes as she read letter after letter, each one a testament to the lives they had touched. Santa placed a comforting hand on her shoulder, his own eyes glistening. "You've done something remarkable, Amanda," he said. "You've reminded the world what Christmas truly means." Amanda wiped her tears, her smile growing. "We've done it together." That night, as the sleigh soared through the starry sky, Amanda looked down at the glowing lights of towns and villages below. For every home they visited, she felt the impact of their work. A child's laughter, a parent's joy, a family brought closer together. As they landed back at the North Pole, the elves greeted them with cheers and music, their excitement spilling into the frosty air. Santa turned to Amanda as they stepped off the sleigh, his voice filled with pride. This Christmas felt different, more complete. Amanda nodded, her heart full, because it included everyone. In the months that followed, Amanda continued to expand their reach. She established a new branch of the workshop dedicated to creating tools for education and empowerment. The elves embraced the changes wholeheartedly, their creativity flourishing under Amanda's leadership. One day, as Amanda reviewed the designs for a new line of books celebrating global holidays, Santa joined her, a steaming mug of cocoa in each hand. "You've transformed the North Pole," he said, handing her a mug. "And in doing so, you've transformed Christmas." Amanda smiled, taking a sip of the rich, spiced drink. "Christmas transformed me first," she replied. "It gave me a home, a purpose, and a chance to believe in myself. I just want to pass that on." Santa chuckled. "Well, you've done more than that. You've created a legacy." Amanda looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "It's our legacy," she said softly. As the North Pole continued to evolve, Amanda realized that her journey wasn't just about changing the world. It was about embracing who she was and the unique light she brought to the season. And with Santa by her side, she knew that the best was yet to come. Years passed, and the North Pole became more than just a magical hub of Christmas. It was a symbol of unity, hope, and inclusivity. Under Amanda's guidance, the workshop flourished in ways that even Santa hadn't imagined. The toys became more than just gifts. They became stories, bridges, and connections between children of every background, culture, and ability. Amanda stood at the balcony of the main workshop one evening, watching as the elves worked below. The scene was a symphony of motion and joy. Elves packing colorful toys, enchanted snowflakes falling from the high ceilings, and bursts of laughter punctuating the hum of activity. "Every year, it feels a little more magical," Santa said, stepping beside her. Amanda smiled, leaning on the railing. Because it is. Every child we reach, every smile we inspire, it adds to the magic. Santa looked at her, his expression thoughtful. Do you ever stop to realize how much you've accomplished, Amanda? You've changed the way the world sees Christmas. And you've changed us here at the North Pole. Amanda's cheeks flushed, but she shook her head modestly. I didn't do it alone. None of this would have been possible without you, the elves, or the children who believed in us. Santa chuckled, his eyes twinkling. You always find a way to share the credit, but it's your heart that made this possible. Your vision has become part of Christmas itself. One snowy morning, Amanda and Santa receive a visitor, a journalist from the human world who had been granted rare permission to enter the North Pole. Her mission was to write about the evolving face of Christmas. Mrs. Claus, the journalist, said as they sat in the cozy parlor, a notebook balanced on her knee, "You've become a symbol of hope for so many children." How does that feel? Amanda hesitated, her fingers brushing the edge of her teacup. Honestly, it's humbling. I spent so much of my life feeling like I didn't belong. But being here, working with Santa and elves, I realized that belonging isn't something you wait for. It's something you create. The journalist smiled. And what's next for Christmas? Amanda glanced at Santa, who gave her an encouraging nod. We're just getting started. Christmas isn't just a holiday. It's a chance to remind people of what they can achieve when they come together. We want every child, every family, to feel like they're part of something bigger. That's the legacy we're building. As the years turned into decades, Amanda and Santa's legacy grew. The North Pole's influence stretched far beyond the season, inspiring year-round programs that brought education, joy, and support to communities in need. Elves took on new roles, becoming ambassadors of goodwill, traveling to schools, orphanages, and hospitals to share the magic of Christmas in person. Amanda introduced an annual tradition called the Lights of Unity, where every community was invited to light a candle or lantern on Christmas Eve, symbolizing their connection to the spirit of the season. One Christmas Eve, as Amanda and Santa prepared for their annual journey, they paused to admire the view from their sleigh. The world below was alight with 1,000,000 tiny glows, each one representing a home, a family, a child who believed in the magic they worked so hard to create. "It's beautiful," Amanda said, her voice filled with awe. Santa nodded, his hand resting gently on hers. "It's a reflection of everything we've built together." In time, Amanda and Santa's story became a legend, told by elves and humans alike. It was said that their love and partnership were the heart of Christmas, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could grow into something extraordinary. One quiet night, long after the celebrations had ended, Amanda and Santa sat by the fire, their hands intertwined. "Do you ever wonder how it all started?" Amanda asked softly. Santa chuckled. "I remember it clearly. A woman with a determined heart knocked on my door with a wild idea." Amanda laughed, shaking her head. "And somehow, it turned into this." Santa's voice grew tender. "It turned into exactly what it was meant to be. A life filled with purpose, love, and joy." Amanda leaned her head on his shoulder, watching the firelight dance. "I never thought I'd find this, but now, I can't imagine life without it." "Neither can I," Santa replied, his voice steady. "Because the greatest gift isn't what we give to the world, it's what we find in each other." And so, the legacy of Amanda and Santa Claus became a story of transformation, resilience, and the enduring power of love. For generations to come, their partnership would remind the world that the true spirit of Christmas wasn't found in gifts or decorations, but in the connections we build and the kindness we share.